I don't usually talk about things like this, but if you didn't know, I read a lot and I needed an outlet for this book series that I've read recently. So it's called the Boys of Tommen series. It's made up of 5 different books. There's 5 out right now. There's a 6th one coming out at the end of May, and it might be out depending when I post this video. I don't know. But I've only read the first 2 books, which are called Binding 13 and Keeping 13. And since I read those 2 books, I read them back to back, but ever since then I've been reading other books because I really honestly needed a break. But the first 2 books followed Shannon and Joey, and then the 3rd and 4th are about Joey and Aoife, and then the 5th is about Claire and Gibbsy, and then the one coming out later this year is about Hughie and Lizzie. And if you're like, girl, what are you saying right now? Don't worry, I drew a family tree. So some general background on this book. It takes place in Ireland in the year 2005. The characters are high schoolers. And then there's a lot of mention of abuse gonna be in this video because a lot of the book is about that, but I'm not gonna focus on that part. Just keep in mind, it's gonna be mentioned a lot. And then obviously there's gonna be spoilers, like a lot of them, because I'm gonna be talking about everything. The main characters in this book are Shannon and Johnny. Shannon is 15 at the beginning of the book, and Johnny starts out as being 17 years old. So Shannon lives in an abusive household with 4 out of 5 of her brothers. She's the only girl. The oldest brother is Darren, and he moved out the second that he turned 18, which was like 5 years ago, and now he lives a few hours away from his family with his boyfriend Alex. Because of this, Shannon and Joey resent him because he left them behind. Shannon's little brothers are named Tig, Ollie, and Sean. Tig is about 11, Ollie's about like 9 years old, I believe, and then Sean is like 3 years old. Oh yeah, and Joey is 17 or 18, one of the two. So their mother's name is Mary, and she was also abused by the father throughout this book, Teddy, and was impregnated by him when she was 14, and he was either 17 or 18 years old. Shannon's best friends are Claire and Lizzie. Claire is very bubbly and positive, whereas Lizzie is very sarcastic and like pessimistic. So Johnny is a rugby player for his school, but he's so good at the sport that he's being considered to play for the country. Johnny's parents are rich, his mother is a clothing designer, and his father is a lawyer. Johnny's best friends are Gibbsy, Hughie, and Feely. Gibbsy is his best friend and romantically interested in Claire throughout the books. Hughie is Claire's older brother and has a girlfriend named Katie. And Feely's just kind of there to be there. He's the most tame and level-headed of the group throughout the books. Like, he's the most normal person, but he gets the least screen time. And then one more person on the rugby team that's mentioned a lot in this book is Cormac. He gets with Bella, which is Johnny's toxic ex, who throughout the book is trying to get back with Johnny, which causes Johnny and Cormac to stop being friends because he's associating with Bella, who is crazy. And I know that that's a lot of characters. Like, it took me about 75% of the first book to kind of understand who was who confidently. So here's this flowchart I made. You're welcome. So the first book in the series starts with our main character, Shannon, giving a background on her life, pretty much. So we learn that she's been bullied her whole life in school, she's malnourished and small, and she lives in an abusive home. She has an older brother, Joey, that she adores, and she's transferring schools because she was beat up really badly by girls at her old school. And she's transferring from a school called Ballylagan Community School to a school called Tommen College. She also mentions that her 2 childhood best friends are gonna be at Tommen, Claire and Lizzie. She starts her first day of school, she's very nervous, but she finds her friends and then she feels better. And then it happens that she's walking through a field that she doesn't realize the rugby team is actively playing on, and as she's leaving, she gets hit in the head with a ball. She thinks it's intentional because she's always been bullied, but it turns out to be Johnny, and he's really apologetic. Like, she's kind of out of it mentally, like she's delirious and like... So we're thinking, does she have a concussion? But he takes her to the nurse's office and then her mom pulls up. So her mom is really mad and she's threatening Johnny to like sue him and get him in trouble with the police and all this stuff because she's used to her daughter being bullied her entire life. But then Shannon's like, Mom, chill. He didn't mean to. So her mom kind of calms down, but she tells Johnny, stay away from my daughter. So long story short, he doesn't listen and they keep hanging out around each other throughout like the next few months, and Shannon keeps getting in trouble. So for example, there was a picture of them printed together from one of his rugby games in the newspaper, and then her dad saw it, and he hit her because of it because he doesn't trust that she's staying away from Johnny. And he shames her, calling her a whore and a slut and stuff, saying that she's gonna end up like her mother, whom he impregnated when she was 14 and he was either 17 or 18. And this is a recurring theme, him constantly berating her and saying that she'll end up like her mother. So we see their friend group start to merge. We see Claire and Gibbsy always flirting with each other, and you know, they're book number 5, so their time will come. But the book is told through both Shannon and Johnny's points of view, so we've been reading about Johnny's struggles with himself as well. So pretty much, a few weeks ago before the school year started, he got a surgery to fix a tear in his muscle in his groin area, and he's never let it fully heal because he just wants to keep practicing and keep getting better. But it's not healing. So he's constantly in pain and agony every time he's working out or playing rugby. But he hasn't told anyone because he doesn't want to miss his shot to play for his country. He lets it slip out to Shannon at one point. Like, he tells her, yeah, I'm injured and I'm playing on it. So she gets worried about him too. But nothing really comes of that. Like, she doesn't tell anyone. So now we're nearing the end of the book. They're away on a school trip that's like for a rugby game, which doesn't really make sense to me. But anyways, so Johnny's playing in the game, he gets severely injured, and he like collapses on the field. So he goes to the locker room, and Shannon follows him in because she wants to see him before he's taken away to the hospital. So they end up making out on like the bench in the changing room, and Shannon's like on his lap, like on top of him, which I mentioned because they got caught in this position by like their principal and like the paramedics, and they get in trouble, and the principal says, I'm gonna tell your parents, which is like, crap. What's her dad gonna do about that, you know? So they're separated. Johnny goes to the hospital and she's forced to go back to the hotel room because, you know, they're on a school trip. So Shannon and Gibbsy decide to sneak out of the hotel to see him in the hospital, and they go to see him. He's doped up on drugs because, you know, he just got out of surgery to fix the damage to his groin area, and he's saying stuff that he should not be saying because, you know, he's on drugs and he doesn't realize what he's saying. So, like, he's confessing his love to Shannon and, like, saying all the stuff to his parents and to her. Yeah. Anyways, Shannon sees this and then she's forced to go home. So she goes home where her father beats her so severely that her lung literally collapses and she's, like, within an inch of her life. The book ends with her mother and her brother Tig and older brother Joey in the kitchen, and they're trying to like stop the father from like killing her, and Joey is like telling the mom, you need to pick him or us, like you need to stop this, like you staying with him is, look what it's doing to your kids. And that's literally how the book ends, with Shannon on the kitchen floor bleeding out and Joey telling their mother, him or us. So first thing, Shannon's size is mentioned so many times in this book that I actually regret not keeping track of how many times it was mentioned. Now I understand, she used it to describe how Shannon was malnourished, so like she's small and she hasn't grown because of the abuse that she's withstanding at her house. I understand that, but after a certain point, it's just so repetitive and it doesn't feel like that's the purpose it's serving anymore. So like the first time that Johnny sees her, he questions if she's even old enough to be in secondary school. He goes, Christ, she really was a tiny little thing. Was she even old enough to attend secondary school? She didn't look it. Right now she looked very, very young and sad. But then, literally 4 pages later, her beauty is mentioned. She opened her eyes and, F me, I unintentionally sucked in a sharp breath. Jesus, this girl was beautiful. I'd noticed it earlier, of course. She had a striking look about her. But now, seeing her up close like this and being able to count the freckles on her face, 11 by the way, it was hitting home just how striking she was. Her blue eyes were big and round and effing beautiful, with small hues of yellow dotting through them, rimmed with thick, long lashes. I wasn't sure I'd ever seen that shade of blue before. It certainly didn't shake anything up in the memory bank. Hands down, she possessed the most gorgeous pair of eyes I'd ever seen in my life. She had long, elbow-length, dark brown hair that was thick and curled at the ends, and hidden behind the mountain of hair was a small, heart-shaped face, smooth, clear skin, and a tiny dimple in her chin. You get it, right? Like, I'm not gonna finish reading this description. Like, he thinks she's pretty. Which obviously isn't weird in and of itself, but like 2 pages ago, you were talking about how tiny she is and how you don't think she's in secondary school, and now you're lusting after her? There was this one scene in particular that actually like drove me off the edge. Like I was like, what do you mean? So she's trying to get up on one of the kitchen stools, but she literally can't reach the kitchen stool. You can sit down, Shannon, he said gently. It's okay. Okay. Padding over to the island, I moved for one of the stools only to flame in embarrassment when I couldn't hoist myself up. I tried again and failed miserably. Is there a spring to lower this? I knew I was small, but this was just ridiculous. The leather seat of the stool was grazing my ribcage. Huh? Johnny called over his shoulder as he rummaged around the fridge with a box of cereal tucked under his arm. The stool, I replied, red-faced, I can't reach. He cast a quick glance over his shoulder and smirked when he noticed my predicament. There was, he explained, walking over to me. He placed a box of Cheerios and a pint of milk on the island, but Gibbsy has a habit of breaking everything he touches. Without a warning, Johnny grabbed my hips and lifted me onto the stool. In this book, she's described as barely reaching 5 feet tall, so I'm assuming she's maybe 4'11" to 5 feet tall, right? But what I don't understand is how is the stool reaching your rib cage? That's the height of a child, not someone that's 5 feet tall. That's so weird to me. And her small size is mentioned so many times throughout this book that after a certain point, it literally just had me groaning at the wall every time I read it. And there's no way mentioning it this many times was helpful to the plot anymore. It was just aggravating and repetitive. I was so struck down by the sight of this tiny mud-covered girl that I just nodded like a effing Egypt. 2 lines down, she was tiny, seriously effing small, barely reaching my chest in height. I looked down at the tiny little female under my arm. Who could attack her? She was so small and frail. Which, I'm gonna get into that, but he calls women females so much, and that drove me insane too. We'll get into that later. At that exact moment, my gaze landed on the tiny brunette, laden down with an armful of books, skipping down the steps of the science building and hurrying over to the blonde. 2 lines down. Why did every single thing about this tiny effing girl scream out to me? Another thing that's constantly mentioned in this book is how big and brawny Johnny is and how tiny and frail Shannon is. So they make it so obvious. Guys, their size difference is so significant. At 5'10" and 16 years old, Ronan wasn't small by any means, but at 17, 6'3" and growing, I was a big bastard. Standing a good 20 or so feet away, I was at a visual disadvantage, but I was close enough to see how every inch of Johnny's upper body strained against the confinement of his jersey, from his broad shoulders to his tree trunk-sized biceps and long, lean torso. His legs were long, his thighs thick and muscular, all of which were caked in grass and mud. I noted the small tear on the sleeve of his jersey where his bicep was bulging. Lord, he was quite literally bursting out of the fabric. He was dressed identically to the other boys, in the same jersey and shorts, but was incomparably different because of the sheer size of his body. He was almost too big, too muscular, too scary, too beautiful, too much. Can I remind you, we are talking about a 17-year-old right now? Seriously? Another thing about Johnny that really irritated me is how bad his anger issues were, and how angry he always was. He never thought things through, he always just did them. He would just start beating people up without thinking about it, and it was really annoying. It happens multiple times where he's trying to, defend Shannon's honor or something, and she's like, Johnny, just leave it, no, don't do it. And then he does it anyway. Which brings up another thing that annoyed me in this book. She always forgave him. He, would apologize and be like, I'm sorry, I didn't listen to you. She's like, it's okay. That happened, 5 times. Every single conflict between these two was resolved immediately. And remember how I said he had an injury in his groin? If you read this book, they will not let you forget that fact. You will be reminded of it every other page. Johnny's cock and balls.
You did it at my birthday dinner.
Are mentioned so much in this book that I actually I don't even know what to do with it. I'm just scarred. I'm scarred. When I was done icing my balls, I took my sweet ass time assessing one of the long-term injuries, the most worrying being the angry looking scar on my inner groin. And then a few lines down, I was sore as bleep down there. Cock, balls, groin, thighs. Every part of me ached, all the damn time. I wasn't sure whether my balls hurt more from the injury or the need for release. I had always been proud of my body. I had been blessed with natural muscle retention and physical strength, and I paid for every ab on my stomach with a grueling trailing regime. He's 17, guys. I worked damn hard to keep myself in peak physical condition, but the purple balls, swollen sack, and oozing scar weren't something I wanted anyone to see. Not even myself. That's so gross. Oh my god. Without my cock blinding my ability to make good choices in lieu of P-word, I was able to see through Bella's facade, and it wasn't pretty. Everything hurt. My balls, my legs, my dick, my head. Another really awful thing is that he keeps having really gross conversations with other people about his balls and stuff. Mainly with his best friend Gibbsy. So for example, Gibbsy snorted, says the EJ who's been sticking his cock in anything with a pulse since first year. It wasn't until I finished eating that I noticed the blue ice pack on top of my gear bag. There was a small note perched on top that read, "Ice your balls, Cap. Effing Gibbsy." I mentally counted in my head, wondering how long Gibbsy could keep his mouth shut, but only got to 7 when he started back up with his verbal BS. How are you managing with ejaculating? I snapped my head towards him. Excuse me? Ejaculating, Gibbsy clarified straight-faced. You seem full of pent-up frustration. I'm just wondering if it's cock-related. You're wanking, right? I know you were out of action for a while when they sawed at your ball sack, but are you able to get yourself off again, aren't you? The F, I gaped at him. Are these words actually coming out of your mouth? For once I agree with Johnny. You were right, Gibbs, I groaned. I'm so screwed. I am? His eyebrows shot up in surprise. About what? Before I had a chance to respond, his eyes widened in comical awareness. Are you effing yourself? Or at least, it would have been comical if it wasn't so effing depressing. Holy bleep, Johnny. You haven't or you can't? I tried, I failed, I haven't tried since, so now I'm fairly sure I can't. I decided to throw out there. There's no GD point in trying to evade the question. He wasn't going to let it go, and I had much bigger issues right now than my temperamental testosterone. How long has it been? Before Christmas, I replied quickly by saying, but that's not the problem here. Jesus, Cav. I'd say that's a very big problem, lad. Gibbsy let out a low whistle. Have you tried lube? Oh my Jesus, Gibbsy cringed and slapped a hand across his mouth. Oh no, he groaned. It wouldn't work, would it? My dick worked, Gibbs, I snapped. I get hard, asshole. It just hurts when I... When you what? He asked, eyes wide. I can't finish, I muttered. You can't come, he choked out? Like at all? I mean, I suppose I could if I tried, I sighed dejectedly. But the last time I tried, it was so painful I puked my guts out and almost passed out. Jesus, when was the last time you tried? St. Stephen's night? Holy bleep, Gibbsy gasped. Johnny, that was months ago. You need to come, lad. Don't you effing think I know that I bit out? It's not like I'm enjoying this, Gibbs. That's unnatural. Yeah, Gibbs, it's my day. I'm well aware how abnormal it is. No wonder you're limping, he muttered. Your balls are so full of spunk, they're weighing you down. How many times are they gonna have the same exact conversation? And like, once again, I want to reiterate, these are all children. If you wanted them to talk about weird stuff like this, make them adult characters. And also, there's scenes between Johnny and Shannon and like, of them doing stuff. So if you want to write a book about people doing stuff together, make them adults. It's really not that hard. You could have just aged them up. Why do they have to be 15, 16, 17? That's weird. So uncomfortable. Now, I also have to bring up the book covers. So, the far left column of this image, those are like the original printed book covers. The middle row, that's the ones that I have. And then the ones on the far right are like special edition. I don't really know. But it gets worse because why are these the covers on Goodreads? What's going on? Now I'm going to talk about the fact that Johnny keeps referring to women as females in this book, and it's so annoying, and I'm like, this guy is just awful. Shannon, a panicked female voice called out, distracting us both. Shannon. If I had to say what type of female I was interested in, it wouldn't be blondes or brunettes, curvy or skinny. A girl, a effing female I'd known for no longer than 2 hours, had managed to do what no one else ever had. Knock me off kilter. Older brothers should have found some older female friends and had them kick the bleep out of these mean girls. Okay, next topic of discussion. He is so sexist about Bella and just like so dehumanizing. If you don't remember, Bella is his ex, like person that he would sleep with for like 8 months or something. But then they like, they stopped because he got injured. Instead, I nodded and said, yeah, that sounds about right. While wishing I knew the appropriate etiquette to use when dealing with the vindictive girls, I'd been foolish enough to stick my dick inside. I'm talking about you, I shot back with a sneer, and I'm wondering what the hell ever possessed me to put my dick inside of something so effing poisonous. Like, oh my god, this guy's just like the average toxic man. I don't know why so many people are like, yes, Johnny Kavanaugh, and they like in love with him online. He's just awful and sexist. The only time he's like a good person is when it comes to Shannon. That doesn't make him a good person. I hate that trope when it's like, he's a jerk to everyone, but then he's good to her. No, he's still just a horrible person. I don't like him. Another huge problem I have with this book that made it like kind of unreadable is how repetitive it is. So like, for example, in chapter 15, we see Shannon's point of view where she's getting harassed by one of the rugby guys that Johnny has beef with. And then after chapter 15, chapter 16 starts. Now it's Johnny's point of view. We go back in time 20 minutes ago to him sitting in the locker room. We see him walking out of the locker room. He sees Shannon getting harassed, and we see the entire scene all over again. And it's like, the author is assuming that we don't know how to read between the lines, and like, we need her to spell out everything for us. Like, I wonder what Johnny was thinking in that situation. Like, I think I have enough of a brain to, like, assume that he was angry based off his actions through Shannon's point of view. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to be spelled out for me. And, like, this book is 603 pages long. It does not need to be that long. It could be 300 pages. It could be 400 pages. I would understand that. Like, the average book size that I read is, like, 400 pages. 600 pages is really pushing it. And so much of this content in this book is filler. Just straight up filler. Seeing the scene through both of their points of views and like just the same repeated conversations over and over again. Like, oh my god, it was so like, I wanted to rip my hair out. I don't know how I read this whole book and then proceeded to pick up the second one. I don't know what was wrong with me. So this book starts off right where the last book left off. So Shannon and her brothers Joey and Tig are in the kitchen with their parents, Teddy and Marie, and Shannon's bleeding out on the floor. In this scene, we see how much Tig has like pent up anger inside of him because of all the things that he's dealt with in his upbringing, which is important throughout this book. So Shannon ends up getting taken to the hospital, and while she's there, we see that her friends who've been suspecting that someone's been hurting her but haven't known who, they finally find out that, oh, it was her father all along. And then her brother, Darren, the oldest brother that had previously moved out, he moves back in so that he can take care of the mother and his younger siblings. And the father has been missing ever since all the events took place. And now they have a restraining order against him. So a lot of this book is about Shannon's family struggling with like their new lives and everything that previously has happened to them. Shannon and Joey don't trust Darren because he keeps vouching for their mother even though they have no trust in her, and she's been letting all these things happen to them through their eyes. They also don't trust Darren because he left them when they were kids, and they see it as that he left them to fend for themselves and left them behind. And Tig, even though he's only 11, has so much anger in him and always lashes out at everyone around him. So Shannon and Johnny regularly see each other, which at the beginning, her mother and Darren are both strongly against, and they say, stay away from him, stay away from him. So that causes a lot of conflict. But then eventually Darren gets on board when he realizes that Johnny's actually good for her and that he's taking care of her. Meanwhile, Johnny is properly recovering from his surgery this time, and he's doing his best to heal so that he can get back on track so he can end up playing for his country over the summer. He's impatient and frustrated and doesn't want to wait. He just wants to be able to play full capacity again. So we see his inner turmoil throughout this book, but he does listen to his trainers and eventually heals completely. So Johnny's parents become aware of the fact that Shannon's home life is horrible, and they grow very sympathetic to her younger siblings, and knowing that they have to grow up in this household. They meet her younger brothers and they see how much anger Tig has inside of him, and they see how sweet Ollie is despite everything. And they meet her youngest brother Sean, who's 3 and can't even speak properly because he hasn't been properly raised. So throughout all this, Shannon and her family are living in constant dread, worried that their father's gonna come back any day. And Shannon is especially worried that he's gonna come back, talk her mom back into taking him in, and then they're gonna go right back to square one. So one night, Joey comes back home. He's clearly on drugs, which is a problem that he's been dealing with in the past, and it's revealed that he's recently been coping with them again. He gets in a fight with his mother and Darren, and then he storms out saying that he can't do it anymore and he wants to leave. His younger siblings are all really heartbroken because they see it as a Darren part 2, like leaving them. But Darren follows him out and he promises that he's gonna go find Joey. On this same night, their father Teddy comes back and he seems drunk and completely out of it. He sees Shannon and tells her to go up to bed and make sure all her siblings are in bed too. Scared, she goes up to her room and blocks the door with a bunch of furniture. And she immediately calls Johnny, who comes over. Johnny helps sneak Shannon out of her window and then helps sneak the siblings out of the front door, and he notices that the entire house is like covered in a wet substance. As he's walking Shannon's younger brothers out of the front door, the mother Mary even helps and like coughs to cover up the noise of the door opening and making sure that Ted doesn't turn around, and he drives all of them to his house. A few hours later, they learn that Teddy actually burned down the entire house with him and Marie in it, and that the wet substance all over the floor was alcohol, so like he lit them up in flames, and he was planning on doing that with the children in there as well. And as the kids are mourning the loss of their mother, it's revealed that Johnny's parents have been considering fostering them ever since they met Shannon's younger siblings, and they all agreed to stay with Johnny's parents. After a while, Darren moves back to live at home with his boyfriend. So Johnny goes away over the summer to train because he got accepted to play for Ireland professionally, and while living with Johnny's parents, Shannon starts to get regular meals and starts being much more healthy weight, and she even grows several inches. And the book ends with Johnny coming home after the summer with the offer to play professionally, like long term, but he'd have to move several hours away and live there permanently, but he chooses not to because he wants to live out like the rest of his youth with his friends at home. Tig and Joey both end up going to Tommen, and then that's where the book ends. So this book was much better. I enjoyed it much more than the first book. Shannon's tiny size wasn't mentioned that many times, which is good. We learned how to not be so repetitive, and Johnny's balls were also mentioned a lot less than the other book. However, there were a lot more uncomfortable conversations about his junk, and this time it wasn't just with Gibbsy, it was also with his mother. And it was just like uncomfortable. I don't even want to look for them. I'm sorry. Just take my word, okay? I also liked how in this book her younger brothers actually had a role. Like they actually had character development and they had a personality, which I really enjoyed that. This book did still have a bit of a repetition problem. Like this had 641 pages. It really didn't need to be that long. It did the same thing that the other book did, where it just repeated scenes like through both of their points of views. It was a lot more tame though. It wasn't as unbearable. But something that made me icked out about this book happened at the end, and I'm just gonna read it. Shaking my head, I tilted it to one side, watching as Shannon ran down the beach, screaming mercy at Claire, who was hunting her down with a handful of seaweed. She was laughing and smiling and all golden tanned, and that beautiful brown hair was loose and blowing in the light breeze. But none of those things were what had my mouth hanging open. No, it was the tiny scrap of a red bikini she was wearing, filled out by a body I didn't remember her having. I could have caught flies. I looked so effing dumbstruck at the sight of her. Christ, something had happened to my girlfriend in the time we'd spent apart this summer. When I left for camp, I had left Shannon behind in a loose t-shirt and even looser shorts. She was all pale skin and protruding bones. Standing here now, I felt like I had stepped out of Gibbsy's car and into an alternate effing universe. Legs. Effing legs. And Christ, she was still punt-sized, slimmer than the other girls, but holy, she was filling out that bikini like a dream. This book had me so happy for Shannon that she's finally like being a healthy weight and she's being taken care of like how she should have been her whole life. Why is Johnny's first instinct to objectify her? That was gross to me. I don't know. Thank God we're at the end of that. First book actually like drove me into like some, I don't even know how to describe it. It like took me somewhere I didn't want to go and I don't want to go back there. Second book, much better. I'm excited to read the next two books because listen, you might be thinking, girl, why are you reading the next two books if you're had such a bad experience with the first book? Listen, the second book rekindled my appreciation, okay? And I think that the third and fourth will also be really good because they have really positive reviews online. And plus, it's Joey and Aoife. Like, they're so cool. They're such cool characters. I didn't really talk about them much, like in like a positive light, but Joey and Aoife are really cool. But anyways, let me know if you think this is a fun little thing for me to be doing, you know, talk about books. I like talking about books. I talk about books to people that don't ask me to talk about books. So if you want me to talk about books, I'll talk about books. But anyways, yeah, hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry that I put that all on you. We're all in this together, right?